Good morning, everyone. Warren County Fiscal Court, Thursday, May 23rd, 's call to order. We're going to start with an invocation from Magistrate Ron Cummings, and that'll be followed by a pledge to the flag by Esquire Rex McWhorter.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord Jesus, we come to you today, Lord, to conduct the business of the county, Lord. This is an important meeting, important presentation, Lord. So I'm going to pray right now for wisdom, for discernment that's going to come from this report, Lord, that we all take it in a way that's going to be better for Warren County going forward. Lord, just again, we thank you for this day. I know the rain's tough, but Lord, we need the rain to have the good days. So Lord, as we come to you today, right now, Lord, as we seek your wisdom, we seek your counsel, Lord, and may all things that we do give you honor and glory in all that we do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Amen.
Please stand, face the flag. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, clerk, please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Here.
Esquire Williams.
Here.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Here.
Esquire Aldridge.
Here.
Esquire Lasley.
Here.
First item is approved minutes of the fiscal court meeting on May 9th, 2024. Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Lasley. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Approved personnel changes for Warren County. Motion by Squire McWhorter, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 6, approved work schedule for the Warren County Road Department. Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Lasley. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire
Yes,
McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
We're going to take a momentary break. Now, I know Joe Plunk is confused about having a opening prayer about his presentation on the secondary rural roads, and especially Megan thinking, wow, this is important. But we do care about this presentation as well. We're going to have another one at the end of our meeting. However, we're glad to have Megan Anderson, Stuart Payton, and Joe Plunk here, District 3, and they're going to give a report on the secondary rural roads. Too much work. Just kidding.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm Megan Anderson with the Transportation Cabinet. With me I have Stuart Payton and Joe Plunk, and I'm here to present our rural secondary road program for the 24-25 fiscal year. In front of you is what I will be talking about, so you can follow along. So for the fiscal year 24-25 projected allotment, we had $1,986,805 with a balance carryover of $215,041 for a total funds available of $2,201,846. Of that, flex funds is 15% of the initial distribution, so that's $298,021. Item 1 is the routine maintenance and traffic of 155 miles of rural secondary roads in Warren County, totaling $715,200. And then we have the flex funds in there for $298,021. And now here comes the fun stuff. Item 3 is Kentucky 961, which is Allenton New Cut Road resurface. So this will be resurfaced 3.7 miles of Kentucky 961, beginning at the intersection with Kentucky 2629, extending east to the intersection with Claypool-Boyce Road for a total of 3.7 miles. Project will have base failure repairs made prior to the resurfacing, and then the section will receive rock shoulders and permanent pavement markings, and this will actually complete that whole section of roadway. The total cost estimated for that is $573,285. Item 4 is Kentucky 1297 Gotts Hydro and that's to resurface 1 mile, beginning with a pavement joint at mile point 5.435, extending east to the intersection with Kentucky 101, mile point 6.435. That project will have base failure repairs and a full mill throughout the project limits prior to being resurfaced, and the completed project will include chip seal shoulders and permanent pavement markings. Item 5, Kentucky 2326 Otter Gap Road resurface. That is to resurface 0.919 miles of Kentucky 2326, beginning with the intersection of Kentucky 31W extending north to the Edmonson County line. Project will have base failure repairs along with the full mill prior to being resurfaced, and the completed project will include chip seal shoulders and permanent pavement markings. And the estimated cost for that is $192,099. Item 6 is Kentucky 2631 Ben Leo Road, and this is to resurface 1.526 miles beginning at the intersection with Kentucky 263 extending south to the intersection with mouth of Gasper Road. Project will have base failures repaired, pipe replacements completed prior to being resurfaced, and the completed project will then have chip seal shoulders and permanent pavement markings. And then item 7, we are going to do some tree trimming for the canopy that's over the roadway on Kentucky 961 and Kentucky 2631. $19,940 is the estimated total for that, having a remaining balance of 0.
Awesome. Anyone have any questions for Megan?
Just increase that number, like double it next year.
If I could, I would.
That's great. We always appreciate the partnership that we have with you and Joe and Stuart. Thank you so much. Joe had to wear a tie today, so he's not really crazy about it, but we appreciate him looking dapper. But Megan, thank you so much for the
Thank you.
presentation.
I have
Yes,
one
Ron.
question before you sit down. These 4 projects, 3 projects here, 4 projects, when you expect the starts?
Those should let sometime this summer,
So by fall, maybe we'll be done?
possibly.
Good, thank you.
Great. Any other questions for Megan? Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
All right, back to our agenda. Item 7 is approved second and final reading of ordinance 2421 establishing Standard Avenue, Superior Court, Noble Court, Merritt Street, and Merritt Court located in the Standard at Blue Level subdivision as county roads and authorizing maintenance thereon and setting speed limits thereon. Motion by Squire McWhorter, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams. Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 8 is approved second and final reading of ordinance 2422 establishing Sunflower Lane, Woodgate Circle, and Wheatcroft Court located in Dove Point subdivision as county roads and authorizing maintenance thereon and setting speed limits thereon. Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams. Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 9 is approved second and final reading of ordinance 2423 establishing Melody Avenue, Cadence Lane, Octave Street, and Rhythm Lane located in Harmony Subdivision, Section 1 as county roads and authorizing maintenance thereon and setting speed limits thereon. Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire McWhorter. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams. Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 10 is authorize judge executive to sign all documents relating to the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet roadway centerline maintenance program through Brad. Motion by Squire Lasley, second by Squire Lawrence. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 11 is approved determination in the amount of $34,000 to Atlantic Emergency Solutions for air packs for the Hadley Volunteer Fire Department. This is paid for by the State Fire Commission aid funds at no cost to Warren County and is a single source vendor.
Motion.
Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire McWhorter. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 12 is approved determination the amount of $22,299 to Atlantic Emergency Solutions for purchase of turnout gear for the Hadley Volunteer Fire Department. This as well is paid for by the State Fire Commission aid funds at no cost to Warren County. 3 quotes were obtained. This was the lowest and best.
Motion.
Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire Cummings. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 13 is approved determination amount of $2,500 to Pi Barker for required annual wet sprinkler test at the Warren County Justice Center. This is the contracted vendor. Motion by Squire Williams, second by Squire Lawrence. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved determination the amount of $9,700 to Fox Excavation and Contracting for a concrete sidewalk and pad for the new playground at Buchanan Park. 3 quotes were solicited, 2 received. This was the lowest and best. Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire Cummings. If you have not had a chance to go take a look at our new playground at Buchanan Park, I would highly encourage you to do it. Saturday is going to be a great day, so take your family out there. Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 15 is grant authority to advertise that the Warren County Road Department, in partnership with CAECO, will hold a reverse online auction on 6/13/24 at 9 a.m. to purchase 750 tons of salt. We reserve the right to accept or reject any and all bids. Motion by Squire Lasley, second by Squire Lawrence. Discussion or questions?
Josh, how many tons are we anticipated potentially buying this year?
Last year, we didn't take any last year because we had a couple mild winters. So we're down to, we've probably got 300 or 400 tons right now. I anticipate we'll take at least 500, may take the full 750. We're going to wait till later in the season, may do some improvements to the barn itself. You know, we've got some metal and things that need to be fixed on that that's in the budget for this year. So I would say October, November, we'll place an order, but we'll see what those come in. The bids have been coming back pretty consistent, within a couple dollars a ton for the last couple of years. So we'll see what they look like, and we'll bring that back before you all probably next meeting.
Thank you.
Yep.
Item 16 is approved determination. Did we call the roll on that? Well, I'm just going to skip right over it. Let's just do it. No, I apologize. Let's call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Amy, is that correct way to do that? Okay, call the roll. That's good. Item 16 is approved determination the amount of $5,895.40 to Miracle Recreation for the purchase of 4 picnic tables and 3 trash receptacles for the new Buchanan Park Playground. 3 quotes were obtained. This was the lowest and best. Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire McWhorter. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 17 is approve order 2414, reappointing Mike Davenport to the Board of Adjustments. Motion by Squire Williams, second by Squire Lawrence. Discussion or questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 18 is approve the 2023 franchise and property tax settlement for the Warren County Sheriff's Office. Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Lasley. Discussion or questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 19 is approve the April 2024 Treasurer's Report. Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion, corrections, please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 20 is approve the contract between the Department of Corrections and Warren County Fiscal Court for House Bill 556 and authorize judge executive to sign all related documents. This agreement funds approximately $300,000 for the jail's re-entry efforts. Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire Cummings. Discussion or questions?
I will just comment that Steve and them do a great job. This is probably the best thing, besides keeping them locked up, that we do for trying to get these folks and keep that recidivism down. So I applaud them for the efforts they're making, and this is a vital part to hopefully minimize our jail population. So.
Great comments. Thank you. Any other questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 21 is approve a cost of living adjustment of 3.5% for Warren County employees. Motion by Squire Lasley, second by Squire Williams. Discussion or questions? I will just say that happy to do that, but every entity is having to struggle with this. That is an 8%, a 6%, and a 3.5%. And that 3.5% is about $1.3 million to our budget, and it's just cost of living. And I don't mind telling anyone, we're happy to do it, and that is not keeping up with the price of everything else. So it's a very difficult time everyone's in, but we do appreciate being able to opportunity to do that. There's my commentary for what's going on in the world. Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 22 is approve the audit for Warren County for fiscal year 2023. Motion by Squire McWhorter, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 23 is approve the third quarter financial report for Warren County. Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Lasley. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 24 is approve first reading of ordinance 2424, approving the annual budget and appropriations for fiscal year 2024-2025 for Warren County. Before we have a motion on that, I want to give you a few highlights of this budget. So our overall budget increase from $64.8 million to $69.5 million. We have a significant road project on Beach Bend Road for $1.6 million. We have an additional $500,000 road resurfacing from last year, but that's an additional $1 million in the last 2 years to our road resurfacing project, and that is something that needs to happen. So I told you about that cost of living increase. That was about $1.2 million. Our employee health insurance contribution increase cost an additional $192,000. We were able to put more toward the employees for their insurance. The remodel and issues we're doing at Sugar Maple Square is $605,000. We have some plans for that property. Engineering and architect planning for a new government services building. Sheriff contribution increased from $6,115,000 to $6,582,000. We've budgeted for a new CAD system for our county fire departments. An additional $567,000 budgeted for new sheriff vehicles and upfitting. We have a Jennings Creek Park project. $250,000 for a new dump truck for the road department. The jail right now, due to many factors, needs an additional $3 million. I'd like to point out, I think everyone should remember that county government is the one that's responsible for the jail, 100% of those costs, not cities or anyone else, and so that jail is our responsibility. We still have around $3.5 million. People ask about ARPA money. We still have that money allocated, but it is spent on a water sewer upgrade project development out Nashville Road. So that money is committed, just has not been spent yet. There is, of course, monumental growth going out Nashville Road in the 6th District, and our obligations with Warren Water District to provide water and sewer out there is a great use of those funds as well. There's many other things in there, but again, our overall budget is $69.5 million for this fiscal year. We have a motion to accept that. Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire Cummings. By the way, we're required to have that approved through the state before June 30th, and so we do like to get that with plenty of time in case there's questions on that. Now, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments on that budget?
Judge, I'd just like to say I'm happy to see that we're putting the extra money in the paving. We have a lot of areas that obviously need that haven't been touched. It's time to put some lipstick on some of those areas. So thank you for including that, and I'd love to see more.
Amen.
I would too. That budget's a culmination of a workshop that we have, and all the magistrates have opportunities to talk about what their priorities are, and I think this budget reflects that considerably. I'll talk at the end of court about also another item that's in the budget as well, based on some of the discussion that we'll have, but we're excited about it. I think it's obviously a balanced budget. One thing everyone should remember is counties, as a subsection of the state, have zero ability to run a negative budget, which should be a great thing for taxpayers. You absolutely cannot spend more than you have, unlike Washington, D.C., but we're happy to have a balanced budget. So, any other discussion? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence. Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 25 is approved property and casualty insurance and workers' compensation insurance renewal with CAECO in the amount of $999,660. $752,153 is our property and casualty, and $257,537 is our workers' comp. And just as a point of record, our property and casualty insurance went up 31% this year. All of you are seeing increases that way, and so that's one of the issues there. And our workers' comp insurance went up 19%. And these are the struggles. We all are adults and can make hard decisions, but these are the things that keep you sometimes from doing some of the things you want when you have a 30% increase on things you have to do for that. So just as a heads up there. We have a motion for that. Motion by Squire McWhorter, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes,
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 26, grant authority for Warren County Emergency Management to enter into a memorandum of agreement with My Workforce Future, Inc. to host an 8 to 12-week internship for an existing military service member. Motion by Squire Lasley, second by Squire Lawrence. Excited about this project. This is with our South Central Kentucky Workforce Development Board. Found a military member who wants to do this internship, and hopefully that will turn into something great for Warren County. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 27 is approved professional services contract in the amount of $5,000 per month for 15 months with suspenders of disbelief for coordinating and managing the Bowling Green 2050 campaign. Motion by Squire Aldridge, second by Squire Lasley. Discussion or questions? I will tell you, the Bowling Green 2050 is a project that we're working on to map the progress and growth and thoughts of an idea of what this community is going to look like in 2050. Just as a heads up, it is a fact. We have 140,000 residents in Warren County, and we're going to over 200,000 by 2050, which should give everyone in the room a little pause. And so our objective is to get a pretty large group of people together to start mapping out how that can look. And my objective on that is so that we can continue to have the great community that we have, a larger version of it, but not be a different type of community. And so we've got a lot of great people going to be involved in that. Our magistrates will be very involved here starting in July on those committees, and we will have that report hopefully by the end of the year. Any other questions? Please call roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 28 is approved resolution 2419 regarding property acquisition and temporary easement for US 31W road widening project. Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 29 is approve order 2415, appointing Brian Downing to the Warren County Downtown Economic Development Authority Board of Directors. And I will tell you that is replacing Doc Kalen, who is asked to resign from that board for health reasons. Doc has been on the TIF board since 2008 and has done a fantastic job for this community in so many different capacities. And so we hated that. Doc is recovering, but he's asked to be removed from that board. So that is appointing Brian Downing to that.
Motion.
Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Cummings. Discussion or questions? Did you know about that, Brian?
Just now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter. Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Item 30 is approve the budget transfers for Warren County. Motion by Squire McWhorter, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
Treasurer, please report the claims.
General Fund, $1,072,423. Road Fund, $84,899. Jail Fund, $539,260. Stormwater Fund, $194,471. Grant Fund, $199,000. Fed Forfeiture Fund, $5,582. And TIF Fund, $1,366,932. Be happy to answer any questions.
Motion to pay our claims.
Motion by Squire Cummings, second by Squire Aldridge. Discussion or questions? Please call the roll.
Esquire Cummings.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Williams.
Yes.
Esquire McWhorter.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lawrence.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Aldridge.
Yes, ma'am.
Esquire Lasley.
Yes.
All right. That's the conclusion of our regular portion of our meeting, but we do have a presentation, and we're happy to have everyone here today for this. They'll remind everyone, we do have a public presentation at 6 to 8 tonight on this presentation. Today, magistrates can ask any questions they would like. This is not an opportunity for the public to have any comment, because this is the first the magistrates were given this report that we ordered from Mission CIT. They were given that a week, the final draft came in a week ago, and they were given that report, and they've reviewed that. But we've asked Frank Edwards and Keith Brower to come forward and are going to give a presentation and a synopsis of this report. At the conclusion as well, if I didn't see everyone, each fire chief of our 9 departments has their own copy, and they'll be given that when they leave. If you have not gotten that, Deputy Judge Downing has those. Please see him after this presentation. All right, Frank and Keith. Hey, Chris.
Good morning, Judge. We appreciate the opportunity to be here today to present the results of our report and hopefully get some good questions from everybody. And I do want to thank your fire service who is here today. I mean, it's obviously they are interested in the report and in the future of the fire service moving forward. So anyway, my name is Frank Edwards. I'm with a company called Mission CIT. We do all kinds of things in fire emergency services. We do consulting, we do training, we do grant writing, we do promotional testing. So again, we have a lot of expertise, but I focus primarily in consulting, as does Keith. Keith Brower was on the team assisting us. We're both retired fire chiefs, and I apologize for my back meeting you guys, but anyway. We're both retired fire chiefs out of Virginia with a little bit of experience in transition of volunteer and smaller combination departments to larger combination departments. And we also had a third person who was on the team. She's not able to be here today, Karen McQuaid. She was our subject matter expert in volunteer recruitment and retention. She actually worked for Keith in Virginia and was the volunteer program manager for their system of probably anywhere between 1,000 to 1,200 volunteer fire personnel in that system. So Anyway, we are ready to present. And again, thanks to the judge for the confidence in us to do this project. We certainly want to thank Magistrate Aldridge for helping us through this. He pretty much spent the entire 3 days with us when we were on site, and he shepherded us around in his van to all the stations, meet with the volunteer chiefs, and so giving us a sense of the system. We also want to thank the volunteer chiefs and for their input, for their comments, for their honesty. We had the opportunity to meet with just about all of them while we were here. Some of them weren't available, but we met with just about all of them. And certainly we want to thank the men and women of the county fire services, the volunteers who every day put forth their efforts to the community for no pay, no benefits, and do it out of a sense of gratitude. And I apologize, I didn't put it on the list there, but I also want to thank the other folks who helped us with the project report, the emergency manager, the folks in dispatch, the sheriff's office, all provided us with input and information, EMS, while we were here. So I do want to thank them as well. Our study process involved many facets. First, we did a site visit over 3 days, and we visited all 24 fire stations in the county. We also had the fire chiefs fill out a survey ahead of time to give us an inventory of their apparatus, their stations, and their sense of their ability to provide service moving forward and currently. And again, we met with almost all of the fire chiefs, and I apologize, you can't see the writing there much, but we also held focus groups, in-person focus groups with northern fire station folks, southern fire station folks, board of directors, personnel, EMS, dispatch, emergency management folks as well. So we tried to get a good, broad view of the system and the issues impacting the fire services. We also did online surveys of the volunteer fire personnel, the public, and again, other stakeholders like yourselves, local government folks. We had a pretty good response from the volunteer fire folks. 54% of the volunteers filled out a survey. We had an excellent response from the citizens. We typically don't get that large a number from the citizens, so we appreciate that. And again, we had 23 stakeholder surveys. 15 were local emergency services partners, and we had 3 elected officials complete those surveys. So all encompassing, we take all of that information and then we boil down what are the issues, what are the themes moving forward, again, through the fire data. Just to give you, again, from where we're coming from, we think that you have an extremely dedicated number of volunteer members who want to provide good service to the community. That's what they're there for. And they do it through thick and thin, with resources or without resources, they're there. The chiefs have done a great job over the last 20 plus years making things work, keeping their companies together, responding to calls, and providing that service. And stations, we felt like had pretty good equipment and apparatus. Again, you could always want and need more, but for the most part, things were fairly decent. But there were consistent comments from the chiefs that there is need for system improvements and enhancements in the fire service in the county. Pretty much unanimous. And we will say that, you know, you're not unique to any fire department. We do projects all over the country, and again, every fire department, every local government has challenges and needs to make improvements in their organization. So, you know, don't take the report as all negative. Certainly there are recommendations and improvements that could be made, but all organizations have those challenges. To give you a sense of the fire system, I'll go through some numbers and data, and I'll tell you that we had 2 main sources of data for the project. One was from the Bowling Green Police Dispatch Center as kind of an overarching system view of the dispatch process, and then we had data from the volunteer fire companies. So a slight difference, but and I'll explain that in a second. But for the most part, the calls that the fire departments have responded to in the last 3 years have gone up about 43% from 2021. Now, I will qualify that that's not abnormal based on what we're seeing post-COVID. Most everybody's calls went down 2020, 2021, and now they're, because obviously some fire departments stopped going to all the medical calls they were going to reduce the risk to their folks and exposure. So there was a reduction in calls by the county responding to calls, and in the report we have several of the individual volunteer fire departments data, and you'll see the same thing. They go down in 2021, and then they're starting to come back up. So the 43% increase, don't take that too alarming, because that's probably just getting them back to where they were pre-COVID as far as calls. System-wide, the fire services run about 50% of their calls, EMS-related incidents. Again, that's not abnormal for fire departments. Depending on the level of EMS care that the fire departments provide, it can range anywhere between that 50% and 75% of the calls of an organization are EMS-related. The majority of the calls, or the largest number of calls in the county, obviously were between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. when people were up, out and about, traffic, those kinds of things. So again, take that into account. The daytime hours is when the most of the activity is. That's when most of the volunteer chiefs have indicated to us that they have difficulty staffing. So just think about that. The system workload for 2023, we lay that out, and you can see the calls range from just over 300 calls in Barren River to over 1,000 calls in Richardsville. The colors there are indicative of a couple things. One, the Richardsville and Alvaton stations, the volume, the calls that they're running, we typically, there's no magic number to this, but once a volunteer fire company starts getting about 700 calls a year, so basically an average of 2 calls a day, they can start to have some difficulty meeting that demand, particularly if most of that's during the daytime hours. So obviously you've already got 2 fire companies that are over that threshold, and you've got 3 fire companies, Plano, Smiths Grove, and Woodburn, that are approaching it. Woodburn obviously is the closest to that number. And again, that's not a statistical number, but it is kind of what we typically see in the industry. So you've got, the bulk of your fire companies approaching a heavy workload for volunteer organizations. And that is going to be nothing but expected to increase as the county continues to grow. And in the report, I know you have all gotten it, and I don't know how much you've gone through it, but we do have a section in there regarding the growth in the county and the amount of growth that the county is going to be seeing over the few years. So those numbers are going to do nothing but increase. And I'll let Keith talk about NFPA and some staffing real quick.
Morning. Technically, where's the button? So the National Fire Protection Association is one of the organizations that is utilized across the country. Think of it as a best standards organization. So they develop many fire prevention codes and standards that range from administration of organizations to protective turnout gear to training requirements to staffing. And they're all generally based on the intent is to make firefighting as safe as possible. So we consider them as best practices when we reference those. They're national consensus standards, and sometimes they're adopted. The standards are adopted as laws. Sometimes they're just used as reference. But we felt that having a solid basis of an understanding of NFPA standards, particularly when it comes to responses and firefighter safety, that they're very important to use. And again, not legally binding or recommended best practices. The interesting thing is, and I think the important thing to understand is whether you adopt them or not, we're finding that when a firefighter is injured or killed in the line of duty, or when there's substantial damage, the legal process gets involved, and quite frankly, these standards are used by defense attorneys or prosecuting attorneys to cause damages to occur to a community or a fire department. So we think they're again important to pay attention to and utilize as based. So when it comes to your staffing of the fire stations and response times, there are 2 that stand out primarily. NFPA 1710, which is the standard for mainly career fire departments when it talks about response times and response strengths, firefighting resources, number of people involved, and then FPA 1720. The difference is 1720 is more geared towards a system based primarily on volunteers or a combination thereof, which is what we believe Warren County represents at this time. So we're not aware that specific response standards and timeframes have been adopted, but we want to recommend, and looking at the population, looking at the growth, looking at the type of buildings, you don't really meet that urban standard. An urban standard would be more like the city of Bowling Green, where it's more built-up communities, low-rise, high-rise buildings. But the suburban area is where we landed for what Warren County appears to be today, and what you're certainly moving towards, where the population density of 500 to 1,000 people per square miles, the types of buildings, you're getting a lot, we found out from community planning, you're getting a lot of apartment buildings coming in, you've got residential, you've got a lot of strip shopping centers. So you're really approaching that suburban area for the large majority of the growth areas. You do have, as 1720 talks about, you do have rural areas and you do have remote areas. And certainly those are in primarily your agricultural districts. So within those specific sub areas or demand zones, that's where we come up with our standards that we're basing for where Warren County should be in terms of what should be arriving, in what kind of time intervals, how many people, because time is never on our side in the fire service, whether it's a medical emergency, a person in cardiac arrest, or a building fire, where we're dealing with a concept called flashover, which basically means that everything, a one-room fire in a single-family dwelling can rapidly increase and involve multiple rooms just a matter of minutes. We used to say that a person had an escape time of anywhere from 5 to 10 to 15 minutes to get out of a house if their smoke alarm went off. Because of the use of synthetic materials in virtually everything, just look around your home, everything is synthetic now. That emergency, that escape time has dramatically reduced to 3 to 5 minutes on average. So that fire is going to rapidly increase. That's why it's important to have not only a rapid response time, turnout time, but to get there with the proper amount of resources to do the job before it gets out of hand. And we don't always have control over that. So when we look at the 1720 standard, that's pretty much where we landed. So you'll see a recommendation that for the large part of Warren County, we recommend that the goal be established to have 10 people respond within a 10-minute response interval 80% of the time. It's called a fractional standard. But with the advent of GPS, you can actually break out different areas and treat those and look at those response times and make those assessments. You need to establish benchmark data, benchmark objectives to check the efficiency of your system. So, okay.
And the reason we wanted to bring in the piece about NFPA is it's referenced several times in the report, both for staffing, response time, apparatus replacement, those kinds of things. So again, just give you some information on that. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is some of the more specific data that's in the report. The first one being the response time performance of the fire companies, each of the fire companies. And I've got 3 in the presentation today. There's no rhyme or reason to them. There are just 3 that I picked out of the 9. So I'm not trying to point fingers at anybody, I'm just putting 3 up there. But I want to explain it to you so that you understand it when you're looking at the report. Basically, and this data here came from the dispatch center. This is response time from the time the call is dispatched until the first unit arrives on scene for, and again, you can't see it well on the slide, but for the various zones that are in the county. And again, the chiefs have set up different zones in the county, and the calls, the way they're laid out there as to fire, medical, or accidents, that's how dispatch provided the data to us in general categories. So, and this is as the call is dispatched. So it may be dispatched as a fire call, but it's really a smoke detector activation or something like that, but it's just under that category. So don't think that the volume of fires is such in the county. But anyway, so each zone is laid out there. We only put the zones that had greater than 10 incidents in there. And obviously, depending on the fire company, like Hadley doesn't have a lot of calls in most of its zones. Richardsville, on the other hand, it did. So the response time from the time of dispatch to the time a unit arrives on scene is there. The blue column is the turnout time, which is the amount of time from the time the call is dispatched until the first unit starts responding. So that's the amount of time it takes volunteer folks to get to the station to respond on apparatus. And you can see for Richardsville, that's anywhere between probably 3 to 6 to 5 minutes. So depending on the zone and the type of call. The number across the top of each bar is the number of incidents that were in that zone. So as an example, the first column, zone 40 accidents, there were 23 incidents for 2023 in that zone, again, for an average response time of about 16 and a half minutes in that zone, with, again, them getting out of the station in about 4 minutes, 30 seconds, roughly. The red line through there, the benchmark time, is that 10-minute time that Keith just talked about, that we chose for the suburban area. And that's based on, again, an 80% compliance. So the bars are average, so you're going to have as many above and below that number, where the line going across is the 80% threshold for 10 minutes. So you can just see the volume of calls that are above that 10-minute threshold in their areas. Does that make sense? I want to make sure y'all are clear on that. So, all right.
And I'm not going to interrupt very often, but again, that blue line is not someone going in their own personal. That is when an apparatus leaves the station.
It should be when the apparatus is on the radio going to the station. Steve, is that correct? Not always? Okay, so it could be somebody at POV with a portable? Okay, so it could be one of the volunteers on their car with a portable radio.
Thank you.
All right? And Stephen helped us a lot from dispatch, providing us data. This is Woodburn's numbers for 2023. Again, where they are falling within that 10-minute threshold, and the zones that they experience, calls above. Obviously, for the most part, their busiest zones, zone 50 and 51, they're within that 10-minute threshold. The zone 51 fires and accidents, they're above. So for medical calls, there's typically not as much prep time to the turnout process. You're not getting dressed per se unless it's a motor vehicle accident. So those sometimes you can get out of the station quicker than you can on a fire incident. And the last one we have is Hadley. Again, their volume of calls is not, as extensive as the other two, but again, just shows you where they fall. And again, all 9 departments are indicated in the report. The second set of data that we looked at was response reliability. For the most part, and this is not scientific or statistically based, but the data that we got from the dispatch center had calls that were dispatched and then when units were en route, and there were not the same number of incidents between both of those. So the assumption can be is that if you have a call that's dispatched, let's say you have 50 calls that are dispatched, but only 35 calls that have en route times, that 15 calls a unit did not get out on. And so again, that can be indicative of the strength of the performance of the volunteer fire company with getting a unit out to go to incidents. So again, the 3 fire companies that we picked here are just 3 of the 9. This is, again, they're laid out by zone and by the call type in dispatch. Again, Richardsville, they're anywhere between, for the most part, 80 to 90% to 95% of the time getting apparatus out to go to calls in those respective zones. Obviously, different zones may have different effect, but for the most part, they're getting apparatus out to go to calls. And again, there may be some calls where, let's say it's an alarm activation, you get a call from the alarm company, hey, my alarm's going, or we have an alarm going off, units get dispatched, and before units can go en route, the alarm company calls back and says, oh, the homeowner just called, they were burned something on the stove. So those units get dispatched. So it's not necessarily going to be 100% of those failure to responds, or they failure to responds. They could be some where they're disregarded by the homeowner, by people calling back, those kinds of things. Alvaton is next. Again, they have a little bit lower margin, particularly in zone 21 and 22 for medical calls. And again, these are calls over a 3-year period. So again, one indicator of strength or stress on a fire company is their ability to get out. So if you look at zone 21 medical and zone 22 medicals, that has declined over the last 3 years. So they're obviously struggling to get out on those medical types of calls in those zones. They're remaining fairly even for accidents in zone 21, zone 21 fires. But again, they are struggling in certain zones with getting apparatus out for those calls. And then GOT was the other one we put up there. Again, you can see that zone 62 fires, which again, and 61 fires may be, they get more people out quicker, but they are struggling still on medical calls in zone 61 and 62 and 63. They are well below 30% of the time getting apparatus out to go to those incidents. Again, it's not statistical, but it's just an assumption that they are struggling to get apparatus out on calls. The other thing, again, we looked at was membership in the volunteer ranks. The chiefs provided us numbers. Almost all have had a decline since 2021. Several, Browning, Plano, and Smiths Grove have increased, but for the most part, there's been a decline in membership in the volunteer ranks. So when you look at that, you have declining volunteer membership, but increasing calls and increasing populations. That's not where you want to be. You want to have increasing membership as well as the growth. And again, I apologize for this slide. It shows up better in the report. But we also looked at the average volunteer response to calls for 2023. And we've got average numbers. So for Alvaton, in 2023, their average volunteer response to calls was 1.7 volunteers with a high of 2.73 and a low of 0.86. So there's typically a range, but the report provides an average. So again, those departments that provided the data, they've all experienced a decrease since 2021 in their volunteer response to calls of anywhere between 10 to 20+% decrease in volunteer response to calls. They all are pretty much averaging 3 to 5 people per structure fire, which is not bad when you look at the fact that they dispatch 4 companies, 4 districts for a structure fire. But again, they are struggling in an overall sense with getting personnel response to calls. You want to look at this?
I'll just touch on this. This is actually, the source is NFPA 1710, which is the standard that I referred to that would pertain more towards an urban city type of fire department. But this is just a quick overview of really the typical tasks that are required on a fire ground. And they're broken down by a 2,000 square foot single family dwelling, an apartment building, and then a commercial airstrip shopping center. And again, the numbers are hard to see, but just running down those typical tasks: incident command, establishing a water supply, fire flow application with hose lines, support for those hose lines, meaning backup water supplies, search and rescue, ventilation, raising ladders, aerial ladder operations, rapid intervention crew, which is a crew on the outside of the building standing by in case there's a problem on the inside where a firefighter has a mayday or issue. You have a rescue crew that's available to go in immediately and take care of that. and then initial medical care. That's just a quick sampling of the various tasks that have to be performed to run an efficient fire ground. When you look at a single-family dwelling, you're looking at a need of 16 to 17 personnel, okay? So each structure fire here in Warren County gets a dispatch of 4 stations. That would mean an average of 4 to, between 4, a little 4 plus would need to be responding, but also responding within that time parameter. So it's not a matter, it's great if 16 or 17 people get there, but if they get there an hour into the incident, that's not much help. So those response times have to play into that number. When you look at an apartment building, that number increases from 27 to 28 personnel on average, and about the same for a commercial shopping center. So using what I would consider the highest, more stringent standard, it still takes that amount of people, whether it's in the city, in a suburban area, in a rural area, to combat those incidents. So that just gives you a little bit of an overview.
So we'll start to go over our findings now. Again, this is a summary of the things that we feel are important from the system. We feel like there's insufficient funding for capital equipment and station repairs. The volunteers do get some money from the county for those things, but there are stations that need some significant repairs. The Hadley Fire Station needs a new roof. There's space issues in some of the stations. Equipment costs overall have gone up dramatically over the last few years. Breathing apparatus, thermal imaging cameras, turnout gear, the protective equipment that the people use. So just those costs have gone up, and the volunteers, companies are struggling to fund the replacements that they need to do. Again, that shouldn't be any surprise to anybody. There's insufficient volunteer response, especially during the daytime hours. Again, most all the chiefs indicated that to us, that they struggle during the daytime hours to get people to respond. There's no coordinated effort for volunteer recruitment and retention benefits. Each of the volunteer fire companies does their own thing for recruitment in their area. Some do a lot, some don't do as much. But again, we feel like, and it's in our recommendations, that there needs to be a countywide approach to volunteer recruitment and providing retention benefits to those volunteers to just give them some incentive to stay and provide service. If you get a volunteer and can keep them for 3 to 5 years, you're doing a great job today. The days of having volunteers come in and they stay 10 to 20 years, that doesn't happen anymore. But there are some areas that I think, it's in the report that you can recruit and use from, particularly the colleges provide a good source for folks, but again, having that overarching recruitment program would work well. There is a lack of coordination and consensus amongst the volunteer chiefs. They don't always agree on everything, and that's been evident. And they have their own ways that they do business. They have their own fire companies that they're protective of, and again, sometimes that results in a lack of coordination and consensus among them, and that hurts the system. There's also a lack of communications between the fire chiefs and the county. They don't feel like they have a good voice with you, right, wrong, or indifferent. And so again, we think it's important that the chiefs and the fire service have a good communications link with the judge and the fiscal court moving forward. There are multiple dispatch centers with disjointed communications flow during incidents. Currently today, the Bowling Green Police Department Dispatch Center is the central point of public safety answering point, the PSAP. Calls come in there. Depending on the call type, it's then rerouted to either the sheriff's office, EMS, or dispatched for fire, either county or city, or Bowling Green Police. And then those dispatch centers handle the call. When units are responding together, such as, let's say, fire and EMS together on a medical call, or fire in the sheriff's office on an incident, there's no good communications link for them to talk to each other. If if fire gets on scene first and needs to communicate with EMS, they call the dispatch center calls med centers, dispatch center, and it gets relayed back to the ambulance or the medic unit. Same thing with a law enforcement incident. The law enforcement officer's on scene, needs something, has a problem, whatever, wants to update the fire crew. They call the dispatch center, the sheriff's dispatch center. It gets routed to the Bowling Green Police Department center. Then it gets communicated to the fire unit. Sometimes communications get lost. There have been incidents where, information's received of a violent scene that doesn't get relayed to the fire units that are responding. So again, we think there's a disjointment in that process. In most firefighter fatality situations, communications issues typically are in the top 3 reasons for a firefighter fatality of on-scene communications and on-scene communications flow. Another example I'll give, I just remembered, is if it's a fire-only call in the county, let's say it's a structure fire, so you've got 4 volunteer fire companies going to that structure fire in the county. Each volunteer fire company has their own radio frequency. So all the responding apparatus switch over to that radio frequency and operate. If there's multiple calls going on in multiple fire districts, there's multiple places that either the dispatch center has to try to monitor or they're not monitoring, and so either the incident commander is alone to monitor what's going on in that incident and relay back to dispatch. So again, you can have important information on that emergency scene that gets dropped or missed by the incident commander or the Bowling Green dispatch center. They're not catching it, or again, even that, their dispatch process conflicts in that they're also dispatching for Bowling Green Fire, which is busier, than the county. So again, depending on how busy they are, if the county's just as busy, you got one person trying to monitor a lot of different operations going on, and there's a great chance something's going to get dropped. There's a lack of standardization of equipment amongst the fire companies. They all buy their own thing. There's multiple different brands of personal protective equipment. Luckily, they were all using the same brand of breathing apparatus, because that would have been real problematic if they weren't. But again, they're all buying different things. And again, one of our recommendations is that there be a standardization of purchasing, not only for standardization across the board, but also to be able to capture group purchasing benefits. There's some inconsistent health and safety programs for firefighters. None of the firefighters coming in get physicals, entry physicals. They don't get annual physicals. That's a recommendation through the NFPA process that firefighters get annual physicals. Some departments don't allow tobacco use, some do. Some departments do what's called respiratory fit testing, where the breathing apparatus mask that the firefighters use every year, it's required by OSHA that the firefighter be fit tested with that mask to ensure that there's no leaks around that mask. Some of the fire companies are doing that, some aren't. So again, we feel like there's some inconsistencies there that need to be addressed. Most all of the fire stations have limited living conditions and capacity for in-station staffing. And rightfully so. Most of the volunteer fire companies and fire stations were built to just house the apparatus, have the volunteers respond from home, come take the unit, come back, go back home. But today, with the sensitivity towards cancer within the fire service and health and safety, you need to have the ability for those stations to have shower facilities so the firefighters can take showers before they go home, that they can wash their gear to decontaminate it, and that the gear itself is not in the open with the fire apparatus catching the diesel exhaust or gas exhaust and getting embedded in the gear. So the other thing is, most all the stations don't have shower facilities. Most don't have kitchen facilities. So again, if at some point you're going to move to daytime or career paid staffing, most all the stations are not conducive to living conditions for any type of paid staffing. There's no adopted fire prevention code or enforcement authority in the county to do fire code inspections, to do plans review for new occupancies, to make sure that they meet fire codes and that the buildings or the complexes are built to offer the most benefit for firefighters, whether that's for access, water supply, whatever it might be. So those are kind of a highlight of the major the major findings. And so we took all of the, what we thought were the issues, and we broke them down into 4 themes that the recommendations are built around. The first theme is obviously funding of the fire service. The second theme is service delivery provided by the fire service. The second is fragmentation within the system by the 9 volunteer chiefs and just how business is conducted. And then the last theme is health, safety, and wellness, and that's both for the members themselves, but also for the community through the lack of a fire code and fire code enforcement. So we'll go through the recommendations now by those themes. The first one will, again, and these are not in any priority order. There's no priority order to the recommendations that's in the report. We do have an implementation process at the end of the report, which I'll go over some of that in a minute, that does prioritize some things, but for the most part, the recommendations are not prioritized. And again, this is not all of them. We have about 60 recommendations in the report. Again, this is just a highlight of those recommendations. Our recommendation on funding is that the county move away from the fire dues process for funding the volunteer fire service in the county. It's even though it keeps pace for those districts that are growing, the districts that aren't growing, it hinders them because the Hadley area doesn't have the resources that it needs to do the things it needs because, you know, its district is not growing. And so if you move to a more centralized funding process, then money can be distributed based on need, not based on districts and growing. And so we're recommending that the county implement a tax on insurance premiums moving forward to fund the fire services in whole, and again, have that decided through the budget process as to what the priorities are each year for funding within that. And we're saying that there should be funding for necessary improvements to the system, staffing, equipment, and station repairs. Again, we'll talk more about the staffing piece in a few minutes, but there needs to be funding to improve those things in the system. Typically right now, the volunteer chiefs are funded what I would consider to be at a minimum level. They don't have the capacity to do some of the things they need to do for either the equipment they would like to have as far as a replacement process or station repairs and those kinds of things. So as part of our recommendations, we're recommending that the fund to be established through the budget process for capital repairs and equipment. And in the report, we recommend a funding an annual $500,000 a year capital fund for station repairs, you know, capital equipment purchases, whatever, that can be decided again through the budget process, and that money is available for the system to use to fund those capital items. And this is irrespective or outside of fire apparatus replacement. So that's not included in that $500,000 because you cannot touch a piece of fire apparatus today for $500,000, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But so again, a fund, long-term fund annually for capital equipment repairs. We're also recommending that there's a revenue stream that could be tapped into with the volunteer fire companies to bill insurance companies for services that they provide. That most homeowners insurance allows for payment for fire response, and this is non-EMS. So obviously EMS provides its service, it bills insurance companies. This is for services provided by the volunteer fire departments for fires, vehicle accidents, those kinds of things, where they could bill the insurance companies, okay, and then you can structure it several different ways depending on what you want to do. You can just bill the insurance companies, and if they pay, they pay. If they don't, they don't. If they don't, you can decide whether you want to have the homeowner or the person, let's say if it's on the interstate, who caused the accident or was involved in the accident to pay, and you can go after them individually. But some places that I'm familiar with, they just do the insurance billing. If the insurance company doesn't pay, then, you know, that's what it is. But we've roughly estimated about $200,000 a year from that system-wide for all the vehicle accidents, fires, responses, those kinds of things that could be gained by the system. Let me mention here, I'll mention here because I didn't put it specifically in the recommendations, but we do have a section in the report talking about the fire apparatus and the stations in the system and the condition of the fire apparatus. And again, there's several things we looked at for the fire apparatus. If you look at NFPA standards, their recommendation is that apparatus that's greater than 15 years old be put in reserve status, and apparatus that's greater than 25 years old be completely replaced. Looking at your current fleet of apparatus on those standards, 37% of all the pumpers in the county would need to be replaced, 67% of all the tankers would need to be replaced, and 100% of all the aerial units would need to be replaced. We roughly estimated, and this is certainly an estimate, you're probably looking at anywhere between $12 and $15 million for apparatus replacement based on that alone. Now, we did compare the apparatus fleet to another standard with the American Public Works Association. They have a process to evaluate apparatus on a point system, and those numbers actually lend themselves to be worse for the fleet than the NFPA standard. So I did want to throw that out to you regarding the fleet. Second theme on service delivery. We're recommending, and again, we'll go into more detail in a few minutes, we're recommending that the county hire and staff 4 stations with 4 daytime firefighters each to provide a minimum level of response during the daytime hours from 4 stations in the county. Actually, it's firefighters and some officers, so there'd be 1 captain, 3 lieutenants, and then the bulk would be firefighters to respond minimally, and those hours can be set, again, by what the system thinks you need, whether you do, 8 to 6, 7 to 5, whatever you think the best time frame is, but a daytime staffing component to give you a minimum response. And again, we'll talk more about that in a minute. We recommend you should initiate a countywide volunteer recruitment campaign and program to recruit volunteers on a countywide basis, to put resources toward a countywide effort to do that. We're also recommending, and I know they're in the room here, that you consider contracting with Bowling Green Fire for response of 1 unit to all incidents in the county until the daytime staffing is in place. Because as of right now, it'd probably take you a year and a half or more to get that staffing in place. If you want to have some minimum level of coverage, you could work to contract with the city to provide a response into the county for those incidents. Certainly, that'd be obviously something that would have to be worked out between them. And again, once the career staffing was in place during the daytime hours, then that could be phased out. We're also recommending that you move to a closest unit response to all incidents, whether that's between the city and the county or between fire districts. You may have a fire district that, because the lines were drawn, 20 years ago, and the demographics have changed and the growth has changed, you may have a house that's in one district, but it's much closer to another district. And so, you really should consider having the closest unit dispatch, particularly on medical calls. Structure fires, it's not as critical because you've got multi-companies responding anyway, but for those smaller type incidents where the closest unit's responding, not just whose district it's in. We're also recommending that you consider moving to a full-time county dispatch position in the dispatch center to do nothing but to dispatch county fire resources and to monitor incidents and to assist them on calls. Under system fragmentation, again, this is even smaller, and I apologize because there's more bullet points, that the county hire a full-time county fire coordinator to help the volunteer chiefs with running the system, coordinating with them, developing standard policies and procedures, managing the budget process, and those kinds of things, coming up and working with them on best practices to improve the system. We're also recommending to hire a full-time volunteer recruitment and retention coordinator to do nothing but to coordinate volunteer recruitment and retention efforts moving forward. There's no way you can be a full-time paid system. We told the volunteers that while we were here, but you've got to have efforts to increase and maintain the volunteer ranks. We're also recommending to look to consolidate all the dispatch centers into one location, to combine the EMS and the sheriff's office dispatch centers in with Bowling Green. In addition, I did mention earlier, but there's potentially additional fragmentation with an additional EMS provider that's coming into the county, and they've also indicated they're going to have their own dispatch center. So now you see where I'm going. You have multiple dispatch centers, multiple lines of communication that things can get lost. So the plus side of this is that you've already got the personnel, so it's really not going to be personnel cost based. It's going to be more equipment based, technology based, to move that together, but that's one of our recommendations. Again, we're looking at recommending group purchasing for all apparatus and equipment and supplies. A coordinated countywide training program. Again, currently the volunteer companies do pretty much their own training. They may have some joint training together, but not as much maybe as they should. But we're recommending a countywide training program where the volunteers, again, it's in the report that they create a training committee within the Volunteer Chiefs Association that can come up with like a countywide training calendar for countywide training on specific topics or activities they need to work on together. And again, it's also in the report that as much training can be done with the city using the city's facility. We would recommend that as well. We recommend that apparatus specifications and assignment be based on need, not whose turn it is. That obviously maybe worked well in the past, but if you've got a fire company running over 1,000 calls a year and one running 150, the wear and tear on that apparatus is going to be different. And so you're going to get more life out of one than the other, but you need to consider moving apparatus around to, one, extend the life, but two, to assign and purchase apparatus for those companies that need it more than necessarily the others. And again, that part of that is a regular rotation of apparatus among departments. So you may have a piece of apparatus that's in Richardsville that at some point moves to Hadley or moves to somebody else to extend the life. It's not responding as much, so you can still get some more time out of it. And overall, we're looking at, there needs to be an improvement in long-range planning in the system for where fire stations are built, a fire station repair schedule to get stations up to where they need to be, the purchase of the apparatus, service delivery performance standards, so that you could maybe, again, develop a rural and urban zones in the county and develop some response standards that you can then measure and track against, so you can see when there's deficiencies in those zones, either from a response time or staffing perspective. And we can certainly help you with that if you want to. The last section, health, safety, and wellness. We've got a recommendation to hire a full-time county fire marshal to enforce a fire code and to be involved in the plans review process for new construction, new development, so that you ensure that it's being built not only for the safety of the firefighters, but for more importantly, the safety of the public moving forward. The county needs to adopt and enforce the fire prevention code. Obviously, that goes hand in hand with the fire marshal. And that the fire marshal is active in the planning process for new construction, and so the fire service in general has say. Currently, there is some say from the county. Chief Bailey's involved in reviewing plans from the county on certain things, but I think that it needs to be more involved and more focused. There needs to be development of countywide operational standard operating guidelines. From what we were told when we were here, there's only one countywide standard operating guideline which involved communication of some type, and that was for ISO rating purposes. So every department has their own operating guidelines and procedures. From our review, I mean, they're pretty much the same, but there could be differences that may impact an operation. So we feel like there needs to be a core group of operational standards that are developed countywide. There needs to be entry and annual health assessments for volunteer personnel and for the paid personnel that are hired to ensure their safety. We recommend that you look to install some type of exhaust management systems in all the stations and on apparatus to reduce the fumes and the carcinogens that are coming out, and for lack of a better term, infecting the station and the gear that's on the walls and in the station. And we think that the county needs to develop, or the system needs to develop a comprehensive respiratory protection program for, again, entry and annual fit testing, the face mask fit testing, make sure there's appropriate testing of all SCBA units. That they did indicate, that most of the chiefs indicated that there's a contractor that comes out and does that, but again, just make sure that that's done, because the breathing apparatus is the lifeline, other than the water and the hose, is the lifeline for the firefighters when you're inside a building. Standardization of SCBA units in the system. Again, even though they're all using the same manufacturer, some companies had much older units and bottles than we felt comfortable with. So again, there needs to be a standardization of that equipment, so that again, if multiple fire companies are running together, you can switch bottles out, or if you have a rescue situation, you're using the same equipment. And breathing apparatus air compressor testing. Again, a lot of the stations had air compressors to fill the breathing apparatus bottles. Those typically should be tested every year, air samples taken, sent off to make sure that the air quality in those compressors, or coming out of those compressors, is good. And then again, related to the diesel exhaust and fumes, there needs to be appropriate storage of firefighter PPE in the stations, either in separate areas, or it needs to be more well ventilated to keep from the carcinogens just landing on the gear and the firefighters wearing it. So those, again, is kind of an overarching look at our recommendations, and I'll go into the implementation plan. We had 3 phases in our implementation plan. Phase 1 is now to the next 3 years. Phase 2 is the next 3 to 5 years. And phase 3 is the 5 to 10 years. Phase 1 is the daytime career staffing at the 4 stations. The full-time fire coordinator, fire marshal, and volunteer recruitment and retention person, annual health assessments, and assess consolidating the dispatch centers. That's going to be a little bit of a heavy lift, but again, I think you need to start down that road to assess that process. And we've estimated the total phase 1 cost to be about $2.5 million annually, with about $300,000 one-time costs up front. For obviously the bulk of that's personnel costs. It always is in a jurisdiction, but some of the capital costs are in there as well. And again, this is for the first 3 years, so obviously that can be phased in, Judge. And there are also grant opportunities. We've been talking with Mr. Aldridge, Magistrate Aldridge, that there are grant programs through the federal government. They have a staffing grant program where you can get firefighters hired. They will pay the salary and benefits for those firefighters for the first 3 years. So obviously that could help defray costs. You can also apply through that same grant program for volunteer recruitment and retention programs. One of the last places I worked, we got a $900,000 grant for volunteer recruitment and retention over 4 years, and that included money to pay a salary for a volunteer coordinator. So again, there are programs out there that can help you defray and phase in some of these costs. Before I get into the specifics on the career staffing, I want to talk for a minute about volunteer transitions from volunteer departments to volunteer paid departments. And this is, the chart here is from, and the indicators are from the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Has a volunteer and combination officer section. They put together a report many years ago about the transition process. And they indicated that there's 5 indicators for change moving from volunteer systems to what are considered combination systems, which are volunteer paid systems. Community growth, community aging, missed calls, extended response times, and reduced staffing. I don't know about the community aging part. Obviously all the communities in the country are aging, but you've got the other indicators for change in the county that point to the need to bring in some career assistance on staffing. All right, phase 1 staffing. We recommend that there be 4 folks at each of the following stations: Richardsville, Station 3, Woodburn, Station 2, Barren River, Station 2, and Alvaton, Station 3. And the reason for that is twofold. 1, 3 of the 4 are where most of your call volumes are. The other is these departments have the best available stations right now for full-time, daytime staffing, as far as having bathroom, restroom facilities, a day room. Richardsville needs a shower, but Allerton has everything. Woodburn would have to create kind of a little living area for the folks. But again, these were the best stations at the moment for, we felt like, for accommodating paid staffing. And the benefit of a phased-in approach is, again, you could identify and make the station modifications before you actually bring the people in to have those stations ready. And these are in the report, but this is a response coverage map for the phase 1 staffing from those 4 locations. The solid colors are the 8-minute drive time from those stations for coverage. The hatched shaded areas are the 12-minute drive time. What we did there, the NFPA standard is 10 and 14 minutes, but we allowed a minute and a half to 2 minutes for the stations, the crews to get together, don their personal protective equipment, get on the apparatus, and go en route. So 2 minutes is off of the NFPA standard, so the 8 and 12 is what we came up with, and that's why that's there. So again, you can see the coverage area with just those daytime crews. The other reason that we picked, again, the locations was it gives you kind of a 4 corners approach to coverage around the city. Again, particularly down south in the growth areas, but it gives you coverage around the city and the main areas. It also allows, for the most part, I won't say it's going to be 100% on every call, but if you're responding 4 fire companies on a structure fire, more than likely you should get at least 2 of these fire units during the daytime response for a structure fire during the daytime. So you're going to get, 8 people minimum on a structure fire during the daytime hours, plus whatever volunteers are able to still respond. Phase 2 recommendations, which is again 3 to 5 years out, the option that we gave several options here, and that depends on the success of a volunteer recruitment and retention program, because if you're able to continue to get more volunteers and retain what you've got, and you stabilize their response numbers or improve it, hopefully improve it, then you may not need to do the options. So and again, these are in no particular order, but if the volunteer numbers continue to decline and they're not able to be stabilized or improved, then we recommend 4 additional stations for daytime staffing in that time period. Or if it even gets even worse, particularly at night, then an option needs to be to move those 4 daytime stations to 24/7 coverage to give you some minimum level of coverage in the county 24/7. An alternate that we also considered was to, because EMS calls are 50% of the calls, is you could look at staffing several EMS quick response vehicles from the fire stations to respond to those calls and take that workload off of the volunteer fire members from responding. One of the recommendations that's in the report, I didn't cover it, is that we recommend that the EMS system put an ambulance at least at 1, if not more, fire stations in the county to kind of spread their coverage out other than just within the city limits, put it out a little bit more into the county level, and put a unit out there to provide coverage in the county. The phase 2 stations that we would recommend are Plano Station 1, Richardsville Station 1, Smiths Grove Station 1, and then it could be considered either at Gott Station 1 or Alvaton Station 2 for that second phase staffing. You could look at either one. We did, I didn't put both maps in here, but we did look at the coverage between both of those stations. And depending on which option you pick, the phase 2 costs range from 1.1 to 3.5 million. Again, the large bulk of that is personnel costs. This is a map of just the phase 2 coverage. So you take the phase 1 coverage out. This is the phase 2 coverage. Again, the solid areas are the 8-minute travel time. The shaded areas are the 12-minute travel time from those stations. And this is both together, phase 1 and phase 2. Again, 8 and 12-minute coverage. between, and this map, it's, I think we've got the phase 2 staffing it got. But again, it shows you the coverage that you'll get from the phase 1 and phase 2 staffing. And these are all in the report, so you can look at them further. Then the phase 3 recommendations that we have, again, which is 5 to 10 years out, is, we feel like you may need some additional support staffing for the system. Because one of the biggest things you want to try to do is alleviate the volunteer fire departments from the administrative and non-operational duties as much as you can, so they can focus on running calls, training, and those kinds of things. So we think there may be need for some additional support staffing of a county training officer, logistics coordinator, a fire inspector at that point to help with the growth, and maybe a community outreach coordinator to help with fire prevention programs, as well as volunteer recruitment and retention. And we have a proposed organizational structure for phase 1, which shows the fire coordinator working for the judge and working with the volunteer chiefs, and then the volunteer fire recruitment retention person, and then the career officers and firefighters underneath that with the fire marshal, and then linkage between the volunteer recruitment and retention people and the career officers with the volunteer chiefs, because obviously they'll be in their stations, and there needs to be cooperation and communication and direction there. One of the things we recommended in the report, which Keith had experience with, is with putting paid staffing in volunteer stations, is develop a service agreement with that volunteer fire company as to what's the expectations, who's responsible for what, so that's all clear, what the chain of command is, and all those things. So that's one of the recommendations in the report. Keith, if you want to explain why the fire marshal's also got a dotted line to the judge.
The fire marshal is going to need to have enforcement authority to enforce the Kentucky fire standards. Through our research, that is the standard that has been adopted. We also talked to the fire marshal from City of Bowling Green, sort of mirror what they're covering. So you need an enforcement authority that basically can get to a specific issue, particularly with new growth and development. There needs to be a direct reporting, if you will, on major policy issues. You do have some new community standards for water supply that have recently been enacted, so that's good. But you want to make sure that those new standards are being adhered to, as well as other post-occupancy, fire prevention kind of thing. So that's the reason why. So it should be having a direct access to the highest level of policy.
But we feel it's important that the fire coordinator have that direct linkage to the judge, to speak for the fire service, to speak for the chiefs, on behalf of the chiefs to the county on their needs. So that's basically our report. Now let me transition to another part. Realities of implementation. The plan's not going to be without bumps and bruises. There's going to be twists, there's going to be turns with implementation, there's going to be stops, there's going to be starts. There's going to be stuff that works, there's going to be stuff that doesn't work. Okay? So success is not going to be a straight line. In 5 years from now, everything's going to be great. It's a work in progress. Okay, so I just want you guys to know that. Obviously, the chiefs know that. I want everybody to know that there's going to be, struggles moving forward. The other thing is I want to make sure that you guys avoid what I call the Chicken Little syndrome. That the first thing that goes wrong, or the first disagreement that happens, maybe between the fire coordinator and the chiefs, or whatever it is, that the sky's not falling, it's not fatal, we can work through it, we got to work through it, we get to consensus, so just avoid the Chicken Little syndrome. And the last quote that I like to use is, you guys have an opportunity, the county and the fire chiefs and the fire system, to create your future, okay? You can chart the path of where you want it to go this point forward, whether you use our document, you use parts of our document, or you massage it to what you feel like you need. But you can create your own future moving forward. And at that, we appreciate it. We appreciate your time and support. And I forgot to say earlier that good morning to Lucy, who's watching right now.
Okay, does Lucy have any questions? Who's Lucy? Okay, no, I'm playing. Frank and Keith, thank you for the report. I'll say a few things and then we'll have some time for questions. We appreciate that. If you could let us know which of these is not going to work, we'll cut them out right now. Before we start, I wanted to just go over a couple things very quickly, and if you would indulge me, if anyone's here from the Bowling Green Fire Department, if you would just stand up so we can see who's here with us today. Thank you for coming. And now, thank you for coming. Now, if you could, if you're with one of our serve at any capacity with one of our volunteer fire departments, if you would please stand up. I think everyone needs to see. It's great. It's great attendance today. Thank you so much. So for 50 years in Warren County, starting with probably some concerned farmers and concerned business people, we started volunteer fire departments in this county. And for 50 years, they've protected this entire county, their residents, the property, the lives, and have evolved quite a bit. Really, it's truly amazing when you talk, and we have some people that are still involved that were around when we first started, which is amazing to me. But at the same time, we have 9 different departments, and it's important to note that all 9 of those departments have their own board, and they're separate entities, and yet the citizens of Warren County have depended on volunteers to protect their lives and their property and their equipment. And they've also depended on those volunteers at 3 in the morning. I really prefer no one call me at 3 in the morning. But yet the men and women of our volunteer fire departments have taken that call each and every day and have gone out and done the best. And by the way, they do that because they've put their community before self. And that's the type of people I want to be around. It's people that want to think about others first, because that's a much better society. And so, as all of you remember, each member of this court ran on a promise to take a look at the next 50 years of our volunteer fire departments and our fire protection services in the county. This report is pretty detailed. Our fire chiefs are getting it for the first time. The fiscal court authorized, paid for, and hired Mission CIT. They've done a fantastic job on this report. I told them beforehand I had very little contact at all with them on purpose. I didn't want to influence in any way possible what my thoughts were, my personal thoughts were, or whatever. And so I didn't take their phone calls and ignored their emails. To apologize right now. No, I didn't want to talk with them. I wanted to do what was important, which is talk to all of our fire departments, our volunteer fire departments, our Bowling Green, our dispatch, everyone involved, EMS, to find out what the best thing is. And there's an old quote that's very, very true, and it's about change. And change only happens, and this is true in every aspect of your life, whether you believe it or not. So change only happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. And we have been presented an opportunity to change volunteer fire department, and our response and everything that's been built upon for 50 years, and we've had an opportunity presented to us to take a very, very hard look, make very, very hard decisions, but yet each one of us ran for office understanding that our number one option is to do what's in the best interest of Warren County, Kentucky. I'm proud to serve with each and every one of these gentlemen. There's many, many hours of discussion that we're going to have. I promise you there'll be no decisions made today, because we're not allowed to and we're not going to. But I will say these magistrates just approved the first reading of a budget. There is a second reading in our next court meeting, and they were all in favor of funding a fire coordinator for Warren County. So that will tell you the what these magistrates and this fiscal court wants to do for the future of Warren County. But the only way this is going to work is for each and every one of us to have input, which is why we're having a public meeting tonight where any citizen can ask any question of Mission CIT. Tonight, our elected officials will, they possibly might be there or whatever, but that is not open for discussion. We're not having a meeting, so we are not going to comment on that. However, they're going to be allowed to ask any question they want right now. But what I wanted to do to share with you is, again, going back to what does 2075 look like in Warren County? I'll be then serving my 14th, no, I will not be here. Oh, not even close. And crazy, the majority of this room won't be here. But the decisions that we make will affect each citizen of Warren County in 2075. And when we think about that, it's sometimes daunting. But what I'm proud of is this court that I'm honored to serve on and serve with. These gentlemen and all of the employees and staff of Warren County government has made every effort they can in every aspect that they do to make things better for all of Warren County. I'm going to share two things with you, and then we'll open it up for questions. We sometimes wonder how things relate to each other. You might have seen the news. We had a very successful effort in Frankfurt over the last session and in our 6-year road plan. We had over $500 million in road projects, projected $120 million in the next 2 years. Those road projects are vital for fire protection. It's not just so you can get home from the grocery or from work easier and safer. We want to have that as well. But when we think about going to the far remote reaches of Warren County and the plans that we have and being able to have safe, reliable roads so that emergency service personnel can get to your emergency, those are things that are important as well. And so I believe many things that we do all tie back to what the overall and overarching goal is. Now, how many of these recommendations we're going to do, I have no idea and have no comment on. What I will tell you is we are going to earnestly look at each idea to see what we can do to improve and, to be honest with you, take the burden off our overworked and absolutely underpaid volunteer fire departments. Men and women that have committed their lives to making this community better, and we owe that to them to look to see what the next 50 years of volunteer fire departments look like. Tomorrow, we do have that meeting tonight. Tomorrow, this entire report will be available online on our website, warrencountyky.gov. And when you go to that, you're welcome to take a look at that. And if you have a printer, you're welcome to print out 190 pages, knock yourself out. You're welcome to do that. But again, I want to thank Frank and Keith and Lucy for all of the hard work. It was a great time for doing that and ensuring that we have this report. And with that, happy to entertain for these gentlemen any questions that any of the members of Fiscal Court have.
If I would, Judge, can I make one quick other comment?
Yes.
Even though we are done today with our contract with you and our report, we don't want to be done with you to help you. So please reach out if you need help. You know, we've got people who can, you know, provide review on things like job descriptions or whatever. You know, we want to be involved and engaged with you. That's one of the things that we pride ourselves on with our company, is that, you know, you're not just a client that we're done with you and we move on.
Great. Okay. Magistrate
One of
Williams.
the recommendations in the study was to implement a insurance premium tax. Did you have a level of recommendation, and what are your expectations that it will be able to generate?
We did not. We talked about looking at that. What we felt was more important is that we would come up with a funding amount, which is what we're saying is the current funds that the volunteer companies are getting through the fire dues and the different allotments, and the new money through the phased-in approach would be where you would need to start with the insurance tax. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just wondering how much money that we're looking at total.
I mean, the volunteer fire companies or the system, I think they get about 1.8 right now, and if you add another 2.5, you're at 4 or 3, I think.
Thank you.
We looked at different funding options. Obviously, we looked at keeping the fire dues. We looked at a fire district tax. We just felt like the best benefits were overall for the system was the insurance premium.
And again, very quickly, just as a matter of reference, the city of Bowling Green's had an insurance premium tax for 43 years, and it is the most important funder of the city of Bowling Green's fire department. That is just as a matter of fact. Again, we are making no recommendations today, but I think all these questions, that's a great question.
I have a question for you. As far as the parsing of the services that are requested, like when a telephone call comes in and, a telephone call comes into the emergency system and someone says, hey, there's a fire on Richardsville Road. All right, or we need an emergency vehicle at Richardsville Road. Is there a dissemination of the facts to the fire department so they can know what kind of vehicle to send out or what they're going to go be involved with it? That was one of your suggestions, was to be able to put some efficiency into the system so a emergency vehicle might show up versus a ladder truck for
Right. Well, most of the fire companies, again, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, probably have their own response assignments to different call types. Obviously, dispatch will get what information they can before they dispatch the call type. So most of that should be pretty well known up front as to what it is. But I know the fire companies that have ladder trucks, they have their own internal process for which calls those units go on.
What were you expecting as far as the amount of savings that you would be able to have from taking care of the 2,000 calls for EMS service versus sending out the larger trucks and all the other?
It's not so much the cost savings on the apparatus, although there is some. Okay, there is some, but by all means. We were looking at it more from instead of hiring 3 or 4 people to put on a fire unit to go to those calls, you'd have a greater reach or capacity with one person responding on those calls.
Or wear and tear on the
Yes, yes.
Right. Oh, you also mentioned closest to response, like if a call came in a certain place, the fire department that was closest would go. Would that include Bowling Green City? Like, let's say if they were half a mile away from something, but it was still in the county, they would go to that versus being 3/4 of a mile away for a county truck.
That's our recommendation. Yes, certainly that would have to be agreed upon by the city and reciprocal and those kinds of things. But yes.
Any other questions?
Okay, I have several.
Okay.
First of all, I want to say that, kind of echo what Judge Gorman mentioned about the county volunteer fire department is the backbone of our community, and they deserve all the kudos that's happened to this point. But we all recognize that some changes have to be made, and the concerns I have is all this increased funding you're asking for from fiscal court, but yet each volunteer fire department has no responsibility back to us to report, to answer to us, they do their own thing. And that'd be a concern I would have going forward is we've always been here to support volunteer fire departments. I think I can speak for the entire fiscal court. However, with no mechanism in place of responsibility back to us and to determine how that funding is being used and some kind of standardization that we mentioned many times in your report. Do you have a recommendation of how that needs to be done? Because right now there's 9 silos.
Yes.
Everybody's doing their own thing. And we got to figure out a way to put it under one umbrella where we all have some input, some ability reporting and so forth of what's going on, because that's not happening now. It is bothersome to me that of the several chiefs mentioned that there's very little interaction between fiscal court and themselves. And my challenge will be is each and every one of us are always available to anybody if they ask us to be or help or whatever. So the fact that they mentioned that there's this jointed commitment from us to help them, I would push back strongly saying that, what do you need from us specifically? It's easy as a consultant to say, let's just throw more at it. Let's do this and do that. And probably a lot of stuff rightfully so. But we, as responsible for all citizens of Warren County, need to make sure that we spend things prudently and good for the entire county. Governing is hard. This is not an easy job up here. And to make decisions, roads are part of that. Parks, there's so many layers that goes into how we decide, how we try to look at things up here. My concern is, and is there a recommendation from your company, how do we implement something where there is that accountability factor on this side if we're going to give more funding on this side? That's one question.
Okay.
If you want to answer that first before I ask my other ones, that's...
No, yeah, if I could answer that first.
Sure.
Well, one, that's another reason why we looked at implementing the insurance premium tax, is that the money would be collected at the, not that the fire dues money is not collected at the county level now, but it's collected at the county level, and that the fire coordinator would work with the volunteer chiefs for distribution of that or paying bills that the volunteer fire companies have moving forward, okay? And so that the county funding process is more county focused than the volunteer fire company focused, okay? Currently, you have requirements in place for the volunteer companies to provide statements, monthly statements or whatever it is. That's rarely done.
Right.
So, I mean, there can be some level of accountability that you guys want to bring up. And certainly we're cognizant of the increase in cost that we're recommending, but we don't like to shy away from recommending what we think is important and needed just because of that. You know, and I know it's a balancing act. You know, I was a fire chief, Keith was a fire chief. We worked, last place I worked with like 20 other department heads to obtain funding. So it's a balancing act of making the dollars work. But we felt like if we just gave you very marginal improvements or recommendations, it's not going to get you where you need to be. And so, again, but we certainly didn't go hog wild and say, you need 6 stations with 24/7 staffing at $10 million. So, I mean, we tried to be cognizant of the dollar amount and the level that we were recommending as far as staffing on an incremental improvement basis and phased in.
Okay.
Hey,
I hope
Ron,
that
before you
answers
go to your next question, can I just jump in on that?
Sure.
Okay, so talking about the relationship between the coordinator and the 9 chiefs. So part of the question there is what the authority is between the coordinator and the chiefs and how that's envisioned. In your mind, is it largely through fiscal responsibility that the money would be funneled through the coordinator and then distributed to the 9 departments, that would provide the ultimate authority? Or what kind of mechanisms do you envision or recommending that the coordinator would have to ensure compliance and ensure, basically the chain of command that you mentioned for the service agreements would be part of that, I would assume, but what, do the chiefs answer to the coordinator? Does it, if the coordinator feels the chief is not being responsive, is there any mechanism that the coordinator would have, or does it really come back to the financial aspect of it?
The bulk of, well, one, there's a draft job description for the fire coordinator in the report. The bulk of our, I guess, feelings is that relationship is primarily administrative and financial, okay, and planning kinds of things, not necessarily operational. We're not recommending that the fire coordinator go to calls or go to, all the calls and take over command and all those kinds of things, but that to provide administrative assistance and oversight to the system, And so, having said that, I guess from the funding piece is that looking for, again, let's say again, you do group purchasing for breathing apparatus or turnout gear or whatever it is, that there be a contract let and purchase for the entire system, that fire coordinator manages the payments and, working with the treasurer and all that to get those done. On an individual fire company level, as far as expenses and those kinds of things, what I was looking at is the fire company submitting, a needs list, and that's part of the budget process, but also, a reimbursement process for expenses that they might have had to take out of what funds they currently have.
And that would funnel through the coordinator up to,
Yes, yes.
Is that it? Okay. The biggest,
Not to interrupt, you can also audit, formal audits. Where I was a fire chief in Virginia, unfortunately, we had some unfortunate circumstances with volunteer company funding. And we had to go to a formal audit process. We did it in 2 steps. We did a process audit, and we did basically a forensics audit. A process audit was more like, do you have administrative procedures in place to guide your financial management? Are there two signatures required on checks, as an example? Those types of things, the system went through that, and I'm talking about 13 volunteer companies that we did that. And then the next phase was a forensics audit. So the county, I'm sure, gets audited fairly enough and can execute a contract to hire a company to come in and do the same thing for the volunteer companies.
all right. Biggest question I have, and I'm glad Chief's here. Thank you for being here today. Has anybody ever talked about the possibility of taking our county fire department system and the Bowling Green Fire Department and somehow interlocking with each other? Because at the end of the day, I believe in an insurance premium tax is probably a good way to handle this thing, and ultimately could save citizens money because their insurance, the ISO rating goes down, and their insurance gets cheaper. They can, what little bit of funding on the tax would be offset by ISO improvement ratings. So the question I have is, in your study, did you have any conversation at all with the Bowling Green Fire Department about their possible interlocking with us to figure out a way to expand, because they're an ISO rating of 1, which is the best there is. Most of our companies here between 5.5 and 6, that's kind of where most of them are, which is a tremendous improvement from where it was even 10 years ago. So I applaud all of them but at the end of the day, it's all about financial and nobody wants taxes, nobody likes an increase on cost. However, as this county grows, we're going to have some funding mechanisms in place to help us to be able to do what we want to do, to be able to provide the services that the citizens of Warren County not only want, but they demand from us. So my question is have you had any conversations with Bowling Green Fire Department, and is that any kind of a platform to even have a discussion with?
We did not have conversations with Bowling Green Fire Department about that. We did talk to them when we met with them about the closest unit response. So we did bring that up. We talked internally when we were, putting the report together of that being an option, but we felt like that was not necessarily the best direction for the system at this point due to some immediate needs within the county and the response. Do you want to say anything? Yeah, and we did add the piece in there about the Bowling Green going coming into the county until that staffing could be spooled up.
And I think all the gentlemen and ladies in this room, we all want the same thing, which is better services, protection for all people, and to work together. I'll speak for myself and for Fiscal Court. We have a great relationship with the city of Bowling Green. We try to do multiple things together, and this may be a plausible solution of how can we utilize it. Because if we can get our ISO ratings down to 3 and 4, the cost of the insurance premium tax is going to be offset substantially to get better services, more stuff, but yet doesn't cost anybody any more money than what it is right now. Because that's what we're responsible for.
Sure.
Is to look at all of that. It's not just a singular, we can't look just at parks, we cannot look just at roads, we got to look at all of that to make it fit within a certain budget.
Right.
So you think these recommendations that you're throwing out, would it lead to a direct ISO rating improvement in your mind, or does it?
The recommendations that are in the report,
Yes.
certainly they will lend themselves to improvements. Again, there's a section on ISO ratings in the report. Most of the fire companies, areas of best improvement that they can make is in their response to calls and in their training. Okay, so if there can be increased training and increased personnel response to calls, that's where they're gonna get the most bang for the buck on point improvements. Obviously, there's little control they have over the water supply. I mean, obviously, you can make recommendations and make improvements to the water system, but, you know, but for the bulk of the improvements, it's gonna be those two areas for the fire companies. So yes, I mean, certainly not all of them, but where that daytime career staffing is, we'll make improvement, and as far as the response to calls jointly will be improved.
I know even in your report, there were several departments, several people didn't respond to some of the things in there, which is disappointing from my perspective. So if everybody had reported everything that they would have, would it potentially changed your recommendations and your implementation stuff that you're recommending? Because, I mean, I read all 190 pages, and there are a lot of missing information, missing data that would have been helpful to have.
It would have been nice to have, you know, more. It wouldn't have changed the focus of what we recommended. Maybe it would change a little bit, you know, some tweaking of those recommendations. One of the things that we like to do is look at where the heavy call volumes are in a jurisdiction, or in this case, the county, through a heat map of where the calls are located. We didn't have that data as well. So again, that would have pointed where also to put the career staffing, which we didn't have.
Right. Two last questions for me is actually how many structure fires do we have each in Warren County? Did we have each of the last 3 years? True structure fires. I know the majority of our calls are EMS and other things and vehicle stuff, which is all important stuff, but I'm just curious actually how many structure fires we had. Not how many responded, 'cause I know when you could have one fire and have 4 departments respond, well, that goes down to 4 because each of them have their own response to that. I was curious how many actual fires we had.
I don't know the actual number singularly in the county. The number that the chiefs reported through the surveys was 224, but again, as you indicated,
right, but
that's responses.
Right, Plano, Alvaton, Woodman,
yes,
all the responded.
I do not know that.
3 versus it really was 1 fire.
That's correct.
Okay, all right.
Just the way the dispatch center dispatches based on the caller information. So the data that we got from the dispatch center is not what we consider what's called as found when they got on scene.
Okay. Last question for me is really more of a comment than a question is, again, like I said, I'll emphasize the fact how important these gentlemen are to our quality of life we have here. That's one thing we pride ourselves on, that Warren County is absolutely the best place in the world to live. And we know we can't sustain with what we have right now. We understand that. I think we all come to that conclusion that something's going to have to be done differently. And I think we're going to take long and deep discussions on how to best attain that. But the biggest issue I see potentially as an obstacle, and I hope we get a commitment from all 9 fire chiefs, is that we will become unified. We will come, where we all will come together looking out for the best interest of the entire county, not for a particular fire department and so forth, because until we get to that point and this cooperation and coordination of each other, all we're going to do is throw money at stuff that may or may not long-term effectually make a big difference. And that's what I'm for, because we have a proud history, and I understand these people are proud of their fire departments. I get it, and they should have a sense of pride of who they are and what they've done in their community. And the concern of long-term volunteerism is going to be an issue because our society's changing in general. People don't do anything without getting paid for it, and I get it. But I think the key is going to be between our coordination here and that coordination out there is, can we come together for the right thing that benefits everybody?
No, we don't disagree. We don't disagree. Again, we fully support the volunteers. We fully support maintaining them in the system. Again, our recommendations include improvements to helping them through a benefit, some type of benefit, response stipend, whatever you end up wanting to do. The health assessments, again, improving, keeping what volunteers you have or growing them.
Thank you so much for entertaining my questions.
I have one more question for you. At this point in time, we've got 9 departments. By your suggestions, what does that look like in the future? If we still have 9, do we have 10, do we have 15, do we have 6, you know what?
Well, I think within the recommendations, you would still have 9, but there would be more of a county overarching administration to that, to the system for funding, response, and those kinds of things. So, you could maintain the volunteer fire companies as their own separate entity. I mean, how many does Loudon have still? 17. So,
15, excuse me.
Where Keith was in Virginia, they still have 15 volunteer fire companies, but they're underneath of an umbrella of a county approach and county system. So that's what we envision here. We didn't advocate or recommend that they be dissolved or anything.
Have you seen examples of where changes like this have been implemented, where you have seen a consolidation or a reduction in the number of volunteer fire departments? Or is it generally the norm to maintain all pre-existing units?
No, that is a downside of what we are recommending, is that you can get a decline in volunteers for multiple reasons. One, they don't like that direction that we've recommended, or whatever the direction the county decides to move on, so they decide they'll go somewhere else. But two, once you put career staffing in the stations, then there can be a mindset of, I don't need to go to that call because the paid firefighters are there. So then you can have a decline in volunteer response from that perspective as well. So it's going to be really important that the fire coordinator that's hired and the paid fire officers work together with the volunteers and their officers to enhance, develop, train together, operate together, and encourage continued volunteer participation. But that is a downside. One of the places I worked in South Carolina, they did that. They merged paid EMS with fire, which was primarily volunteer, and when they did that, almost all the volunteers kind of withered away.
There's a lot of discussion in here about coordination challenges and fragmentation. And one of your recommendations is to basically have a review of district boundaries. That maybe changes in the road networks, things like that, have led to, and where stations have been built, means that maybe the boundaries are not the most efficient or things like that. To my knowledge, it wasn't included on the implementation plans. Is that something you'd like a review of the district, something that you'd recommend almost immediately as we start moving into phase one?
Again, it's in the report, yes, and it's not in the recommendations. I don't know that was on purpose. But if you move to the closest unit dispatch, then that really is not, that's kind of a moot point at that point, because you are responding the closest units to the incident, no matter the district boundaries.
Is that defined by road distance travel, or is that by area?
The district boundaries?
Or no, the distance to travel to get to your fires? You said the closest one.
Yeah, most of the time it's road miles, yes, sir.
I would think that the district boundaries had more of an impact based on fire dues. People wanted to, where's my dues money going?
Right.
And if you go to a closest unit response with an overall county funding mechanism, it makes more sense.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm probably the longest serving magistrate, Tom and I guess. And 10 years, and I certainly respect greatly all the volunteers. It's not something me physically could do, and I know that we've got to, it's a concern that the younger people will be getting older, like me, and they won't want to do this anymore, but I certainly respect all the people here, and thank you for what you do.
If you guys can solve the volunteer recruitment problem in this county, you need to package it and market it, and you'll make millions of dollars across the country.
Yeah.
Well, if anybody could do it, Warren County could.
Yeah, I think we'll try hard. Want to comment, he might be able to say something, but I do appreciate Master Aldridge's work on this. This is something I dumped on him. We need to have a point of contact, and I appreciate his efforts to take Mission CIT to all the departments, get the lay of the land, do it. One thing I will say, they went to each and every fire station, went through complete apparatus, everything involved. So I appreciate his hard work on being able to bring this report to us.
No, he was great to work with.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you, Court. It was a humbling experience to get to see what it is that the men and women of our volunteer system work with and how they operate daily. I appreciate the hard work of all of you. I appreciate the opportunity and the trust that Fiscal Court afforded me to work with Mission CIT. And the one question that I have, just briefly, if you would, Frank, can you just hit the highlights maybe of what a fire coordinator would be expected to do? You've touched on it through multiple questions, but could you just kind of, in just a real brief, just kind of wrap a ribbon around that and give us more of an overview of how a fire coordinator benefits and supports the volunteer fire system, as I'll throw out as the liaison, if you will, between them and Fiscal Court?
Well, certainly, again, one of the more important ones is that they are that liaison between the fire chiefs and the judge, so that they can, for lack of a better term, bend the judge's ear on issues or things that the fire services need in the county. Not saying they still can't come to their magistrate to have that discussion or whatever, and we're not saying they can't moving forward, but you do have that direct link for that, so that the issues get known. It also provides that direct link for the budgeting process, being involved in the budget process, and then working with the 9 volunteer chiefs to lay out their budget needs over the course of the next year, and developing those long-term plans. Okay, in the next 5 years, where do we see stations where do they need to be? Okay, what reason do they need to be there? And work with the county and city planning department to facilitate that. Also, working with them on what their equipment needs are and helping facilitate all of that. Working with them to develop a training plan for improvement their training, the volunteer recruitment, getting a countywide volunteer recruitment plan and program in place, so that, again, one of the things we recommend in the report is that there be a recruitment committee within the Volunteer Chiefs Association that would work with the volunteer coordinator to develop those volunteer recruitment programs and events and activities throughout the course of a year for the county. So it's more, again, to help take some of the administrative workload off of those volunteer chiefs and let them focus in on the operational and, like I said, training kinds of issues that they need. Not having to worry about calling contractors to get roof repairs or, whatever, maintenance on the apparatus, whatever it might be, that fire coordinator can take some of that load off of them.
Thank you.
All right. Again, Frank and Keith will be here tonight at 6 o'clock for a public meeting. If anyone wants to come to that, from 6 to 8 right here at Fiscal Court, we appreciate that, and be happy to have public comment or questions at that time. But thank you so very much for that report. We appreciate Mission CIT and a very, very valuable report. Again, if you're wanting more information on that, each fire chief has their own copy, but if you want more information on it, you can go to our website tomorrow morning, and that entire report will be on there. So in the interest of time, I am going to say any department head, Lynette Yates might have something to say, but anyone else wants to speak, they can.
Really? You're going to miss an opportunity.
Thank you for a successful election, Lynette. The only reason I called on you, you got all, yes, that's fine. But appreciate everyone's patience and attendance today. Sheriff, everything good? Okay, good. I'm calling on him because he just walked in the door there, so he's been in and out. We do appreciate everyone's time. What a fantastic opportunity we have in front of us. Thank you to the Warren County employees and department heads. We appreciate everything that you've done. Yes.
You might want to remind everybody that Monday is Veterans Day.
Yes.
Memorial Day.
Monday is Memorial Day. If you're not busy, at 10 a.m. at American Legion Post 23, they'll have their Memorial Day luncheon and meeting, and please go to that for that. Any magistrates have anything related to the community they'd like to share?
All I'll say is Boyce is getting ready to fire up for their summer event schedule. If you want to go to the Boyce Community Center Facebook page, whatever, there's something every month out there, and always a lot of fun to attend those events.
Thank you.
And school's out, so hope all those kids and
Yes.
want those graduates, congratulations. Those kindergarten graduates, sixth grade graduates, all the things that are important, gang, and to keep our children safe and happy this summer.
It's tremendous. We're looking for any opportunity to give everyone a medal. That's good. No, I'm kidding. There's a great group of people. We're proud of all that. We hope they have successful educational careers and come back and have their family right here in Warren County, Kentucky. All right. With that, we'll look for a motion to adjourn. Motion by Squire Lawrence, second by Squire Aldridge. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming today.